Today we will be talking about Impressionists. However tempting it is to derive from the name of the movement that Impressionists were these rebels that just wanted to impress everyone, it's not entirely correct. In fact, Impressionists were just too impressed themselves with the reality surrounding us and with the visual imagery that they detect, that they just had this burning desire to show on canvas the world as we see it. In the last video, you can scroll down and you can watch the one about Edouard Monet, and there we talked about the Academy of Fine Art and how artists didn't really have, up until the middle of the 19th century, they didn't have too much freedom to express themselves. In fact, the role of the artist wasn't so much to express his own feelings, but to illustrate the sentiments from literature or religion. We talked about the break with the Academy, with the monopoly that it had to exhibit arts with its annual salon, its annual exhibition, and about the establishing of the new exhibition, Salon of the Rejected, Salon for the artists who wanted more experimentation. So from that point on, and we're talking about the second half of the 19th century, the artists had more freedom. What does it mean? The artists knew that they have alternative ways to exhibit their art, so they don't really have to follow the strict rules of the Academy, which was, let me remind you, strict following to the rules of perspective. Artworks were supposed to have this immense precision that even under the magnifying glass, one could not see the brush stroke. The painting was supposed to have this effect on the viewer that the viewer couldn't really make out how was it made, as if it was magical. It was like a window to this magical reality where women are beautiful and all the topics that artists take upon are very dignified, very honorable, and beautiful. While having received this freedom from the Academy, the mentality of artists changed. They felt free to pursue experimentation. Impressionism perhaps is the movement that made art the way it is today, and all of our lectures will be leading towards contemporary art and will be helping us through studying the history to understand the art that is surrounding us today. Well, Impressionism, as I mentioned, is the movement that is the closest from its predecessors to contemporary art, experimental, requiring reflection, searching for an object within itself. But most importantly, it sowed a very important seed of constant doubt. Is what I am looking at real art? Going ahead a little bit, I will say that the public that first saw Impressionist painting made a very clear verdict. This isn't art. There was even an anecdote in use. The Impressionist method, one critic said, consists of loading a shotgun with paint and firing at a canvas, and then coming up with some intricate name. Impressionism wasn't just born out of thin air. It grew on a fertile soil of many coinciding events. The advent of photography forced artists to abandon the literal depiction of reality. Photography became widely considered the medium to capture the world realistically. It was truly believed that photography captures the world as we see it, just the mere fact of reality. Of course, no one back then thought that actually photography also manipulates this reality by framing, by lighting, even staging. Photography, in a sense, became the tool of realism in art. All this led to reflection of the role of the artist in a modern life. What is the point of painting? What is the role that the artist is playing? What is the bigger picture there that the artists try to achieve? Another fact that might not be very obvious to us how this is connected, but the paint in small tubes was invented, and an easel box entered the market. easel box is an easel that can be folded. The paint in the small tubes could be put inside this easel box. The artist could pick it up quite easily and take it outside. The artist didn't have to anymore stay in his studio to mix paint and to paint before the paint gets dry. Artists had freedom now to go outside to the plein air and to try to capture this fleeting moment of reality right here and now. Of course, before, artists would also go to plein air and work outside, but usually they would only sketch the painting and they had to return to their studio, start mixing the pigments and start painting from their memory. Usually, this memory would become altered. The view that they were supposed to depict became more idealistic, so they could play a little bit more with how they are going to depict this moment that they have just seen or that they have seen a week ago. Now, with these small tubes of paint, artists could actually start and finish an artwork whilst they are viewing the scene. Of course, this required more speedy process because the sun is traveling across the sky, the light is constantly changing, and the colors are changing with the light. So artists had to work very quickly. Hence, Impressionist is known for very brief brushstrokes, and that is what they were condemned for, because the painting didn't seem finished, it didn't seem refined, and it frankly looked like a sketch. Another important thing that fostered the emergence of Impressionist movement was a scientific one. French chemist Michel-Jean Chevreul published A Theory of Color. It was a book that was accessible to our artists, which shed the light on many phenomena about color that wasn't accessible for the old masters, such as complementary colors or painting shade without using the color black. Another not so obvious thing is that in the middle of 19th century, France started trade with Japan. The first Japanese art that was witnessed by our artists was cheap reproduction that the merchants were using to wrap their produce. But the visual language on Japanese art that was so different from everything that European artists were ever taught was really revolutionary in their mind. The simplicity of it, the asymmetrical composition, pure bright colors, the absence of shadows, the flatness of the picture, the complete disdain for the rules of perspective. All of these was adored by Impressionists. It felt that it is so fresh, it is so new. Maybe it doesn't follow the rules of academic painting, but yet somehow it manages to depict the reality even in a tastier way. So all of this was also appropriated by Impressionists. But let's go back to the portable easels and to the artist that goes out in nature, that goes out to the city and tries to capture the fleeting moment. As I mentioned before, the light was changing, so rapid brush strokes were required to finish the painting before the lighting changes. The Impressionists were really striving to depict the world the way it is happening right here and now in front of our own eye. One could say that Impressionists were the first ones to strive to depict the world as we actually see it, not the way that we know it. We might know that the grass is green and that the sky is blue, but not less often do we see the grass gray or purple. Not less do we see the sky pink, red, or yellow, depending on the time of the day. We can say that Impressionists were trying not to depict the objects of our vision, even they were trying to depict the very phenomenon of our vision. Here is the painting by Claude Monet, Impression Sunrise. It was first shown in 1874 in the Impressionist exhibition in Paris. Fun fact, Impressionists never referred to themselves with this term. In fact, when it was first applied, it was essentially an insult. After a critic, Louis Leroy, saw this painting by Claude Monet, he wrote in his review, "When I first saw this work, I thought that my glasses must be dirty. What is this? The picture didn't have neither top nor bottom impression. Of course, I was impressed. Let's look at this painting once again. Of course, if we compare it to academic painting, even to the painting of Edouard Monet, that was already quite revolutionary for the Parisian public of the middle of the 19th century. But here we truly see something that could shock. We see fast brush strokes, everything is melting and mixing. Of course, when we look at this painting, the first thing that draws our attention is brush stroke and texture. If we look at Monet's brush stroke, it is a complete departure from what was expected from the artist back then. Instead of perfectly executed brush strokes and neatly contoured outlines, we see the actual markings from the brush stroke. Some might think it appears rudimentary in execution. However, it is very typical characteristic of the Impressionist technique, the plein air style, where a painting had to be finished in one sitting. What is happening on the painting is not that important for us. Yes, Manet is painting his hometown, where he returns after a long time, is the harbor of Le Havre. He rents a hotel room that faces the harbor and he paints this harbor in a different times of the day, very lovingly, in a different states of light and shadow. But that is not what he was really trying to convey. This story was supposed to be untold. What was important for Monet is to give us the same impression of the view that he had, rather than to tell us a story of a boat. Some say that it represents the industrialization of France, maybe, but not directly. What was important for him and to his fellow Impressionists was to transmit this impression. This is a sunrise. The water is misty, the colors are still not that defined, the sky and the water are kind of merging with each other, and this feeling of tranquility or maybe slight sadness or nostalgia, all this emotion, all this impression was supposed to be transmitted to us by the means of this painting. Another thing that was very important with Impressionists, that they were the first ones to care about the city life, about depicting the beauty of modern civilization, everyday, mundane even, life of a modern person in a modern city. The brightest example of a painter that was completely in love and infatuated by the modern city was Pierre-Auguste Renoir. The world around Impressionists was changing. The Industrial Revolution was at its full speed, and Paris was changing as well. It's important for Impressionists to record this massive renovation of Paris from the mid-19th century that was led by a civic planner, Georges-Jean Haussmann. Many would say this was a Haussmann era of Paris. Wide, tree-lined boulevard that replaced the old narrow streets, large deluxe apartment buildings. Impressionists wanted to depict public leisure, something that didn't really exist before. People sitting in cafe and cabaret, but at the same time, how more and more alienated a person was becoming in a modern metropolis. Look at the famous L'Absinthe by Edgar Degas. This is a dour scene depicting two unfortunate individuals slumped on a bench near a Parisian cafe. It depicts isolation, degradation. It reveals another side to the Impressionist depiction of the truth of life. Degas' heavily-handed paint communicates the quality of emotional burden. The work was scandalous, like so many Impressionist paintings. Degas was slightly older than the majority of Impressionist group, and more he was showing divergence from the technique and from the ideal of the Impressionist movement. And throughout his life, he mostly rejected this label for himself. Degas was really preoccupied with the human form, with depicting it in motion, as in his famous paintings of these numerous ballet dancers at rehearsals. Degas is also probably the least impressionist of all impressionists when it comes to tempo of work. He worked for many days on one painting, in comparison to other impressionists that composed their sketch-like paintings paintings in mere hours. Or let's look at this iconic Camille Pissarro's Boulevard Montmartre afternoon. He painted this same view from his hotel room overlooking Montmartre Boulevard in different times of the day. Here, he applies the plein air technique to the modern city. The work uses broad strokes of paint, carefully applied to the canvas to represent the fleeting nature of modern life and the visual impression of the modern metropolis. This series emphasizes not only the phenomena of natural light as he paints it during different times of the day and different times of the year. It is, in a way, a reflection of the passage of time itself and the transformation of the city. Probably during the Impressionist era, the image of the Parisian bohemia was born. The artists would meet in a variety of Parisian cafes. Café Gerbois was one of the favorite places for not only Impressionist artists but also art critics, writers, novelists, photographers. All of these personalities were from various social, economic backgrounds, and maybe that is why so much creativity was in these circles. The ultimate acceptance of the Impressionist movement can be credited to an art merchant, Paul Durand-Ruel, French art dealer who lived in London. Durand-Ruel met Monet in 1971 and purchased a large amount of his works and has been selling them over the years. Sales went so-so, but then in 1880 he decided to show these works to the American public, and it was a complete success. In the following years, he exhibited Impressionist painting in New York, Philadelphia, Chicago. American public bought more Impressionist paintings than he ever sold in France. Of course, the prices for Impressionist paintings skyrocket to the point that Monet became a millionaire. And little by little, Impressionists, from being this revolutionary movement that has shifted the visual language of painting so far from the academy, started to become academic themselves. So much so that the whole group of American painters came to Monet's residence in Giverny to learn from the leader of the group. There is so much to tell about the Impressionist movement. It united under its roof bright personalities. Each and one of them deserves a separate lecture. We talk in much detail with a lot of funny anecdotes about the Impressionist movement in my big course, Contemporary Art from A to Z. And I hope this lecture was as much informative as entertaining. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in comments below, and please don't forget to subscribe, to press like, and to share this video on your social media with your friends. And next time we're going to be talking about post-impressionism, what came after impressionism, and in particular about Vincent van Gogh. Was he really a genius? And how the image of the suffering and troubled artist became a benchmark for the lifestyle of artists in many generations to come.